Hi, my name is Yulia. Hopefully you're excited to see me again. This is the News Brief. Here we catch up with expertly tailored stories twice a week, and then we discuss them together in the comments, so you don't have to suffer alone, and I don't have to suffer alone. And as per usual, I ask you to please write your questions, suggestions, and constructive criticism in the comments, because I read all of it, and it greatly helps me tailor next episodes to your liking. Today we're going to be talking about a lot of different news coming from all over the world, and it's kind of hard to summarize it in 3 separate sentences, but I guess I'll try. Zelenskyy is planning on convening a meeting as to the end of the war in Ukraine. Syrian rebels changed the rules in the country quite significantly, and Russia, well, Russia is, as per usual, struggling and also deploying traffic lights to figure out where Ukrainian FPV drones are going to hit from next. Let's go. Zelenskyy said, Ukraine's strength defines Russia's global ambitions. The strength of Ukraine determines the strength of Russian army. If Ukraine falls, Putin will return to Syria for revenge, to Africa and to other regions of interest, said Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Well, if you didn't know, and we'll talk about it a little more detailed later, Assad regime fell in Syria, and Assad regime was almost single-handedly kept in power by Putin and his troops in Syria. And it was a regime that actually lasted for about 50 years, but the most recent Assad family member was in power for the past 10, 11? So this is big, and it's the type of dictatorship that no one thought would actually fall, or no one thought would fall anytime soon. But Syrian rebels seized the opportunity of Russia being weak and attacked the regime and literally returned Syria under their control in a 3-day special military operation done right. He emphasized that the events in Syria highlight why Ukraine needs unwavering support from its partners. The Assad regime collapsed not only because of the opposition's strength, but also because Russia lacks troops there. Why? Because the entire combat-ready Russian army is in Ukraine, fighting against the Ukrainian people. Zelenskyy also pointed to Russia's ambitions in Africa, noting the presence of Wagner Group forces. Many Wagner fighters have been destroyed in Ukraine, weakening Russia's plans to control African regimes and influence the continent. He urged global leaders to see the broader implications of the war. Countries that value peace and security, European nations, the United States, and others must recognize that much is being decided here and now. And I agree with him wholeheartedly. Russia is in a very weak spot. Georgia is not going to its plan. Romania is not going to its plan. Syria, well, Syria just blew up in their face, really. Russia lost so many billions of dollars that it invested into Syria. Also, they had to move all of their ships. They had to evacuate all of their personnel. It is really not going well for them, and that also weakens their stance in Africa, too. So Russia is having a really hard time there. Meanwhile, Ukraine is actually coming up on the world stage, and a lot of Western leaders, especially newly elected or to-be elected ones, are visiting Ukraine to show their support. Actually, yesterday, I thought that Trump was visiting Ukraine. And obviously, it seems quite unlikely because he's refused to visit Ukraine before. But in the light of recent events of Trump and Zelenskyy having a conversation and both enjoying it and seeming to love the outcome, I thought maybe. The reason why I thought that is because I was passing by the Intercontinental Hotel in Kyiv, which is the fanciest hotel in the city. And every time foreign politicians visit, they always stay there. And usually when someone very important visits, you can tell by, traffic regulators being there, lots of police presence, also the corsage cars and yada yada. And normally, they're not quite as elevated as they were yesterday. The last time I've seen as many black cars and police presence and traffic regulation in the city center of Kyiv was when Biden visited. So immediately my first thought was, is Trump in Kyiv? But it turns out that it's actually candidate for German Chancellor Friedrich Merz that visited. The Christian Democratic Union leader arrived in Ukraine just a week after current Chancellor Olaf Scholz's visit. This marks Merz's second trip to Ukraine. His first was in May 2022.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says his country is seeking a diplomatic resolution to the war with Russia. He also proposed the deployment of foreign troops to Ukraine until it joins the NATO military alliance. He made the comments during a joint press conference with German opposition leader Friedrich Merz. Zelenskyy has insisted throughout the war that Ukraine needs security guarantees to prevent Russia launching another invasion after the current hostilities end. During their meeting, Merz criticized the current German government for refusing to send long-range weapons to Ukraine.
Our position is clear, including that of my parliamentary group. We want to enable your army to reach military bases in Russia, not the civilian population, not the infrastructure, but to reach the military targets from which your country is being attacked. I said this in the Bundestag a few weeks ago. By limiting the weapons range, we are forcing your country to fight with one hand tied behind its back.
He also referred to French President Emmanuel Macron's proposal for a temporary presence of allied troops in Ukraine as a security measure before full NATO membership. Temporary measures can be considered, but only as a transitional stage. Yeah, because those tend to become permanent, not temporary. Zelenskyy added, urging for a clear timeline for Ukraine's EU and NATO integration. And that also comes as Ukraine is going to convene a contact group in December to discuss diplomatic ends to the war and the possibilities. Ukraine plans to hold a contact group meeting in December to establish a united stance on a diplomatic resolution to the war, according to President Zelenskyy's press secretary Serhiy Nikiforov. Kyiv intends to invite key European partners and the United States to ensure strong support for Ukraine. The final participant list is being finalized, but it includes countries with long-range capabilities, significant investments in Ukrainian weapons production, and a role in our NATO future, Nikiforov stated. President Zelenskyy mentioned that Germany, France, the UK, Italy, Poland, Denmark, and other partners might join the discussion. This is the first time that a contact group is being formed to not talk about peace proposals or victory plans, but actually talk about end of the war. And Zelenskyy has been saying that 2025 might be the year that the hot stage of the war is going to be over. So let's hope that it is, and let's hope that it's with the best intentions for Ukraine and with the best possible outcome. Because, you know, sitting today in Kyiv, I don't know how I feel about it. But that concludes our Ukraine section, and we're moving on to the things that are happening in the West. And we're going to be talking extensively about Syria. Now, Syria is not necessarily the West, but with the changes that come with the rebel government, it kind of seems a lot more Western. So this is where we're going to place it. EU Commissioner for the Defense and Space, Andrius Kubilius, proposes 100 billion defense fund to counter Russia, according to Politico, and that's in euros. We must be ready for the possibility of Russian aggression, Kubilius stated. If we fall in Ukraine, the risk of Russian military action against EU countries will undoubtedly rise, Politico reports. And that is something that a lot more EU and Western leaders in general are coming to terms with, that they really need to increase their defenses because Russia is not just looking at Ukraine. This is a war of survival for Russia, and this is the war of changing the world order. And I'm so happy to see that, better late than never, a lot more leaders are coming to that conclusion. British intelligence says that Ukrainian forces struck Russian S-400 system in Crimea. With all of those very cool and modern air defense systems they just installed. In late November, Ukrainian defense forces targeted a Russian S-400 air defense system in temporarily occupied Crimea. British intelligence reports. Images revealed 2 craters, each about 13.5 meters wide, scattered debris, and 5 emergency vehicles at the scene. Meanwhile, the EU approves €4.2 billion disbursement to Ukraine, according to Prime Minister Shmyhal. The EU Council has approved a €4.2 billion disbursement to Ukraine this month under the Ukraine facility, Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal announced. This brings total assistance under the facility to €16 billion by 2025. This support reflects our shared commitment to strengthening Ukraine's economy, advancing key reforms, pursuing European integration, and securing victory, Shmyhal stated. Interesting, because remember when I said that Romania was not going according to Russia's plan? If you don't know what happened, basically there was a candidate, a presidential candidate that appeared out of nowhere that had absolutely no campaign he was running on other than hate and I am going to ruin Romania, who gained popularity on social media because Russia paid for his insanely huge social media campaign and he was set to win the election. But obviously it was done with a lot of foreign interference. So the Romanian court literally threw out his presidency and annulled the first tour of the election results, saying that they're not going to allow foreign interference in their election. So later, the Romanian police detained 20 armed pro-Russian mercenaries in Bucharest. Romanian authorities have detained 20 armed pro-Russian mercenaries suspected of planning unrest in Bucharest. The group had booked hotels in the city center and allegedly aimed to disrupt protests against pro-Russian presidential candidate Călin Georgescu, who had won the annulled first round of the election. Police also discovered a list of politicians and journalists the mercenaries intended to target with intimidation operations. Talk about foreign interference into an election. You know, anytime Russia says that they did not interfere with something and then sends their troops and literally, and their disinformation forces to that place to create political disruption, it's like, really? Really, there was no Russian interference in the election, and the candidate that won or gained popularity out of nowhere just so happens to be not just pro-Russian, but Russia-loving and wanting to turn the country he's running in into Russia. Totally no Russian interference at all. Germany and US to develop unified drone control system for Ukraine. Germany and the United States are collaborating to create a single drone control program for the Ukrainian armed forces. Rheinmetall will integrate its drones with the Auterion operating system, establishing a unified architecture for drones from various manufacturers. Auterion CEO Lorenz Mayer emphasized that a single standard will enhance the interoperability of autonomous systems. Notably, Ukrainian drones already use the Auterion operating system, so not much is going to be changing, but a lot is going to be developing and evolving. This is where we start talking about Syria. So Syria's dictator government that has been in power for the past 50 years has collapsed. Bashar al-Assad fled the country. People have discovered his house, they have discovered his garage with 50+ super expensive exotic cars. They have discovered torture chambers and political prisons where so many regular people have been imprisoned, mothers who have given birth to children in prison, the children who have never seen the outside world. They have found a hydraulic press where they were pressing human bodies during torture. They have found so many crimes against humanity. And the new government of Syria decided to obviously change things immediately as they come to power and loosen the Islamic regime that has been presiding over Syria for all of this time. Syria's new government bans mandatory hijabs and protects media freedom, Al-Watan states. Syria's new leadership has banned forcing women to wear hijabs, stating that authorities are categorically forbidden from interfering with women's clothing or appearance, including imposing requirements of modesty. Additionally, Syrian rebels have prohibited interference in the work of television, radio, or social media professionals. Personal freedom is guaranteed for all, and respect for human rights is the foundation of building a civilized state, the statement emphasized. This is actually freaking amazing, because this is something Syria hasn't seen in half a century. And this is such a huge reform for them. This is something that people of Iran have been fighting for. They have been fighting for personal freedoms, and they have been fighting for a democracy. And Syria, against everyone's ideas and against everyone's expectations, is about to be a much freer, much more democratic country. Obviously, there is a lot of uncertainty that lies ahead, but anything is better than Assad's regime. Russia, in the meanwhile, lost at least 543 personnel during their Syrian campaign, according to the BBC. According to their investigation, Russia lost at least 543 servicemen and Wagner PMC operatives during its military campaign in Syria. The tally is based on open-source data, including media reports, social media posts, and information from cemeteries and memorials, though the actual number is likely higher. Of those killed, 346 were Wagner members. Russia also lost at least 7 FSB Special Forces officers, including Alpha Group operatives, scouts from the 45th Airborne Special Forces Brigade, GRU soldiers, and over 20 military pilots and navigators. The casualties included 1 major general, 10 colonels, 15 lieutenant colonels, 31 majors, and 61 officers ranging from lieutenant to captain. Many were elite professionals whose training cost Russia millions of dollars over the years. The Russian Ministry of Defense has officially admitted to only 116 fatalities in Syria. Aw, sad. Also, Russia not being honest. Wow, how unexpected. And that is a great time to arrive at our Russian news section because, as per usual, there is a lot to speak about and none of it is favorable to Russia. And it's a really good time to be a news anchor in Ukraine because Russia has been having a hell of a month. Merry Christmas and happy holidays, Russia. A car exploded in Donetsk, and the head of the Olenivka colony, where a terrorist attack against captured Ukrainian soldiers took place, was blown up in it. Aww. Sad. During a car explosion in Donetsk, Sergei Yevsukov, the former head of the Olenivka colony, was nearby, reports MASH. He did not survive the incident. God, so many opportunities to say, aw, sad today. Russian media also reports that his wife, who works for the so-called Occupation Ministry of Internal Affairs, was injured. She's hospitalized in moderate condition, though some sources claim her condition is serious. Preliminary information suggests a plastite charge equivalent to 100 grams of TNT was placed under the Toyota Land Cruiser. This has not been officially confirmed. If you forgot what happened in Olenivka, that's where Azovstal, Azov defenders were placed into Russian captivity as POWs and eventually burned alive inside a building they were locked in by the Russians who held them captive there. And then Russians were trying to say that Ukraine launched a HIMARS strike on that building to kill our own POWs so they wouldn't speak, even though their information was incredibly outdated because they have been off the battlefield at that point for about a month. It was a terrorist attack where Russia killed upwards of 300 Ukrainian servicemen, burned them alive. Russia seeks Turkey's help to withdraw troops from Syria. Following the fall of the Bashar al-Assad regime, Russia has reportedly asked Turkey to assist with its troops' withdrawal from Syria, CNN Turk reports. Yeah, there was a story the other day where some of the Russian troops, or like 300 plus of them, were cut off and encircled by Syrian rebels, and there was no help in sight and no help was going to be coming because obviously Russia can't do anything about it. So they literally on Telegram sent them thoughts and prayers. I mean, legitimately, Russian mill bloggers were like, stay strong, thoughts and prayers, hope everything's gonna be okay, but help is not coming. How lovely. And that, you know, echoes so much with the Russian slogan of, we don't leave ours behind. They truly don't. They just forget they existed. Moscow proposes moving its forces to Turkish-controlled areas of Syria and then flying them back to Russia. However, Russia aims to retain control of its military bases in Tartus and Hmaimim. Yeah, I don't think Russia is going to be able to maintain its control of military bases, and I don't think Turkey is actually going to be helping Russia do anything. If anything, Turkey is going to be helping catapulting Russia out of Syria because it's against its interests to keep Russia in there. And I guess the only positive thing for Russians and a negative thing for Ukrainians this month is that Russians deploy traffic lights to detect Ukrainian FPV drones. Russians are installing specialized traffic lights in combat zones to indicate the presence of Ukrainian FPV drones, according to military radio technology expert Serhiy Flash Poskresnov. These traffic lights are mounted on poles along critical military equipment routes to alert troops in real time. I mean, this is a temporary inconvenience for Ukrainians, but I'm sure that with how our technology evolves and with how our counter warfare evolves, this is not going to be a problem for us for too long of a time. So yeah, I mean, hey, that's a cool little gimmick Russians have, and I'm sure it's not gonna last. And of course, I mean, they do need some good news in the middle of all of the terrible, 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 terrible stuff that's been happening to them. I feel so bad for them. I don't. Anyways, this is a fantastic note to end today's broadcast on, so thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like to catch up on the news more often or twice a week, please do not forget to follow this channel and also turn on all of your notifications so you don't miss a new video with me coming out. And there are a lot more than just this segment on this channel, including more segments with me. If you also enjoyed this video, please like it, leave a comment under it, and send it to a friend because you never know who might enjoy it too or might need to hear the news. And of course, when I said leave a comment, do leave your questions, thoughts, suggestions, constructive criticism, literally anything. I read all of it, I enjoy it, and it helps me greatly to tailor next segments to you. See you next time.